edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I'm your host, Art Stapleton, and we are here in Landover, Maryland. Postgame. I'm wearing all black, so I guess it's a post-mortem for the New York Giants because season's over already, right? Week 1, they lose 21-6 to the Washington Commanders. Not the offensive performance I expected, not the offensive performance the Giants expected, and overall, they are now staring at 0-1 and 0-2 for, I think it's like the 27th season in 28 or something like that. Now, not really, but look, a lot to get to here. Let's start with the positives. The positives, right? Let's talk about, hey, and as I see our guys, former Giants interns, Charlie Muley and Sean DeBarbieri, are now running the PR department here in Washington. So they won the NFLPA award last year for great PR, and we were a part of them being in. So they were just in the booth next to me in the press box. So give them a shout out. And, you know, they know what it's like to be part of a losing team for such a long time and a team that just can't get out of its own way. And when things just feel like they're never going to get any better. And now Washington is broken through. They've gotten through the malaise, and now they have a dynamic quarterback in Jaden Daniels, and they believe they are now going to challenge the Eagles and other contenders for the Super Bowl. And the Giants are now the Washington Commanders of 2 years ago. And until they can break through, until they can get a quarterback who can make dynamic plays, until they can get an offensive line that can somehow stabilize up front, these games are going to feel like it's the same old story. So I mentioned the positive. Obviously, those guys give me a shout out over here. So I wanted to say hello to them. Sean and Charlie, both area guys. And I think it's pretty cool for them to go here. And I know they're both rooting for the Giants when it doesn't affect the Commanders. But anyway, let's get back to just really the biggest positive for the Giants right now is the fact that Abdul Carter was very good. I'll have a post on him on NorthJersey.com. And I know one of the things that's very hard to do is point out a positive in a game like this, and that's not the purpose because I think the rest of the show will all be about what went wrong for the Giants. But I think what you saw from Abdul Carter is a reason why we've been talking about Abdul Carter so much. He affected the game at the end of the first half, made a big tackle on Jaden Daniels on a scramble that Daniels looked like he was heading to the end zone, made a great play in run defense, forced 3rd and short, and that led to the next play when he was unblocked and came in and showed great patience and then forced Daniels into throwing it away to nobody, getting an intentional grounding call. And with Washington sending out the field goal unit, they didn't have any timeouts, so the Giants could choose to let 10 seconds run off the clock and not call their own timeout, which, hey, it's a win. They made sure they didn't screw it up and call a timeout. So they didn't call the timeout. They ran the 10 seconds off. There were 5 seconds left on the clock at that point. So it cost the Commanders 3 points at the end of the first half. And the way the Giants' offense was working, they needed every point to be taken off the board for the Commanders that they could possibly do. So to me, the mood afterwards, and I did talk to Abdul Carter with a couple other reporters, Carter said nothing he did today was good enough because they lost. And you're talking about a guy who blocked a punt, although partially. He blocked the punt. He was on the punt block team today, came close twice, then got a partial deflection on Tressway's boot. It only went 31 yards. In that situation, you know, maybe the Giants can take advantage of that block punt. They did not. And that was kind of the story of the game for the offense. But, again, the Giants need players like Abdul Carter to step up. And he stepped up today, but you like the attitude. He was not gloating about what a great NFL debut he had today, which some of you will say, yeah, you know what? Of course. What are you giving him credit for? But You tend to see that sometimes. That guys, they talk about their own play, the way this happened, and Carter just was not ready to talk about some of the plays that he made, and for good reason. And I don't think the reporters were necessarily looking for him to talk about how great he was. But I do think that he impacted the game today. If Abdul Carter wasn't on this team, this game would have been a lot worse and a lot more one-sided than what it actually was. So, all right, that's the positive. We got the Commanders PR guys, former Giants interns, give them props. Abdul Carter, give him props. One other would be Cordell Flott. I thought he played very well. I don't know what his PFF grade is or anything like that, but I thought he played pretty well today in the start. Tay Banks only came on the field a couple times. We'll see the snap count in the morning. But let's get to the problems. And to me, the number one issue right now, it happened at halftime and it happens after the game. And I think the Giants have handled the Jackson Dart situation beautifully the entire offseason. 4 months worth. They answered every question. They did everything they could do to do the right thing by Jackson Dart's development, to do the right thing by Russell Wilson, allowing him to continue to be the starter. They did the right thing by Jameis Winston, pumping him up, making sure that people knew he wasn't just comic relief. Everything they did with the quarterback room. This week, it was just as bad as 20-1-6. And I'll tell you why. This has nothing to do with Jackson Dart or Jameis Winston not talking to the media this week. You didn't need to talk to Jackson Dart or Jameis Winston. What happened early this morning, first report by Mike Garafolo and Ian Rappaport, is that the Giants had a package in for Jackson Dart, and that if they got to a certain point, they were going to put it out there, and they thought they might be able to get an advantage. And Jackson Dart was the number 2, not just unofficially on the depth chart, but Jackson Dart was number 2 on the depth chart. He was going to back up Russell Wilson today, and that Jameis Winston was going to be inactive, but that makes him the emergency quarterback since he's on the 53-man roster. So if something were to happen injury-wise for Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart, then Jameis can end up playing. But neither Jackson Dart or Jameis Winston played. And I think the big problem I have here is somebody in the Giants organization decided it was cool to let it out that Jackson Dart, we had a package, we might use Jackson Dart in a certain package. I'm not going to start pointing fingers because it's not about who said it. But the Giants set themselves up for all of the questions that happen now after the game and for the rest of the season until Jackson Dart becomes a starter on this team. Because you did what you could to protect this week, not have Jackson Dart talk, not have Jameis Winston talk. Keep all the focus on Russell Wilson. Brian Daboll handled it from the spring. Russell Wilson is our starting quarterback. The last thing you needed today were all those reports this morning. Was it a little overconfidence? Was it good reporting? Maybe on Mike Garafolo's part, maybe it was good reporting. But when every national reporter follows that up with the same report, something's a little weird going on there. And this isn't about me not reporting it first or anything like that. To me, that kind of speculation, why are you talking about that and letting that go out before the game? You were coming in here playing a team that was one win away from the Super Bowl last year. And now all of a sudden, the morning shows this morning are talking about Jackson Dart and how you might have a package of plays. Now, if there was an opportunity that you weren't going to use that package, and if you're Brian Daboll and you weren't going to play Jackson Dart at all unless circumstances presented themselves, the last thing you needed today was going into this game, Russell Wilson producing 3 points on the board at halftime, and now everyone waiting for the Jackson Dart package to come. It was silly. It was a miscalculation on the Giants' part. Whoever made that decision to let it go out, go out there. And I know how these things go, okay? This wasn't great reporting across the board. Everybody who wanted to write it this morning wrote it because somebody was confirming it. And the Giants know it's fact. And now you've created a situation where the offense looked bad, little over 200 yards total offense, 6 points for the second straight year in the season opener. I know it's not about the past, but the reality is that it is now, the clock is ticking even louder now for Jackson Dart than it was. Now, Brian Daboll was asked afterwards, and I know it's a difficult situation for a head coach to be right after the game at the podium, but that's the job. And the fact that Daboll was asked directly, will you commit to Russell being the starter? Daboll playing essentially his company line of, let's watch the tape tomorrow, let's decide. I have no doubt I will be very surprised if he comes out and says that Jackson Dart is starting against the Cowboys. But now Daboll was in a position where he had to answer questions about the Jackson Dart package, and he did. And he said he was asked if he gave any thought to playing Jackson Dart. And Daboll said, I did not. So what was the purpose? And if I'm Brian Daboll, I'm looking at everyone in my organization and I'm saying, why did we put that out there? And again, I'm not claiming that I know who put that out there with the different reports. But the bottom line is it was out there, and they can't refute it because it obviously happened. And somewhere along the line, somebody wanted that out there. So it's just not good because now it sets you up. Now, if you're not going to follow through and play Jackson Dart, now it sets that up for no reason. And it's not about talking to the media. Who cares? You guys don't care. You're watching this. You don't care. If I have a job to do and I want to write a story about Jackson Dart and Jackson Dart won't talk because the Giants will let him talk, then I'll just write that story. And in it, I'll say Jackson Dart wasn't allowed to talk for the story. And that's the end of it. But nobody cares about media policies as far as consumers go. That's our problem with the Giants for our jobs. And nobody wants to know how the sausage is made. So what I'm sharing with this audience is the fact that all of that went out in the pregame, I think, sets the Giants up now for something this week that they are now going to have to answer. And if they don't answer it, it's not the media's fault for asking the questions. It's someone on the Giants, in the Giants organization, confirming this Jackson Dart package, this mysterious Jackson Dart package. And one of the things I thought about was, did the Giants put it out there because they wanted Washington to have to think about it? Maybe. Maybe that was the thinking. But it sure didn't seem to bother the Commanders too much about having to worry if Jackson Dart was going to play. So I just think it was a miscalculation on the Giants' part. Whoever put that out there, I think it just sets yourselves up now for more questions this week, because now it's not going to go away because you had a hand in making it a story. So again, I don't know. I don't think they're going to Jackson Dart next week. As Brian Daboll said, it wasn't just the Russell Wilson. This game isn't on Russell Wilson. It's true, but Russell Wilson could play better. The offensive line, that's probably what concerns me the most. I don't believe Andrew Thomas is the magic wand that is going to fix being pushed around, having one guy make a mistake and then on the next play make a mistake. Now, does Andrew Thomas have the holding penalty that James Hudson had that ended up wiping out the 16-yard completion to Theo Johnson and taking the Giants out of the red zone? Well, the Giants didn't get in the end zone when they had their red zone opportunities in the first half. So, I'd like to say that maybe it would have been different, but it wasn't. And now it's no excuses. I know everyone's going to look at this defense and the way it was built and the idea that, well, how come they didn't have 15 sacks and they weren't dominant and they weren't this and they weren't that? Look, The Giants defense in 2007 gave up 80-something points in the first 2 weeks. This Giants defense, all things considered, played pretty well today. Could they get Jaden Daniels off the field? No. His scrambling ability killed him. And it's not me taking a victory lap when I remind people that when I talked about maybe Abdul Carter spying him a little bit, that's all I said. A little bit. Spying Jaden Daniels a little bit. Rushing the rest of the game. Same for Brian Burns. That spy worked early in the game against Jaden Daniels because Jaden Daniels is the kind of quarterback who will just kill you with off-script plays, and he did that today. The Giants had perfect coverage. They forced them into second and longs, third and longs. Daniels makes the perfect pass. I mean, let's be honest. There were at least 4 plays of 15 or more yards that the Commanders dropped on Jaden Daniels. The guy's a phenomenal player. There's a reason why Brian Daboll wanted to trade up and get Jaden Daniels. It was never happening. So this defense, I think maybe we're talking in terms of the standard and what they're doing. I mean, Brian Burns had 2 sacks. Kayvon Thibodeau had a sack, and Abdul Carter had a half a sack. So they were getting some pressure on Jaden Daniels. You're not going to attack Jaden Daniels the same way as you might another quarterback. So I think the Micah McFadden injury is a big one. What I can tell you, and I got a text during the game. I didn't have a chance to report it. And then I saw that Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network reported it, that x-rays were negative for Micah McFadden. It was a leg injury. To me, it sounds like a sprain, but obviously I would imagine he'll go for more tests tomorrow. I know he was in a walking boot on the sideline, maybe a high ankle sprain, but nothing conclusive until he goes for more tests tomorrow. But the fact that it wasn't a fracture of some kind at least gives you a little optimism as far as maybe Micah McFadden will be back at some point this season. I don't think this is a 1 or 2 week injury, but I do think that maybe they dodged a bullet. We'll wait and see, because obviously a CT scan could show something completely different tomorrow, an MRI, but we'll see what happens. Giants linebackers were exposed today, inside linebackers. Darius Muasau came in, and 2 plays after McFadden went off, he gave up the touchdown pass to Zach Ertz. Now, I don't know if Muasau was in zone or if he was in man. We just don't have a way to know that as we're watching the game. We can guess, but that's something that, maybe they're looking at the wire at this point this week and saying, you know what, we need to get another linebacker in here to see. Bobby Okereke, he was okay, but it wasn't necessarily the game plan that you would see Bobby Okereke from 2 years ago. He had a difficult time making a tackle on Austin Eckler in coverage. Eckler got past him, but I don't even think it was a missed tackle as much as I give Eckler a little credit for having that shake and bake to get around Okereke. But Giants are definitely missing that big playmaker in the middle of the field that Bobby Okereke was 2 years ago. And I think for Bobby O's situation, it'll be very interesting to see going into next week if they can get more out of their inside linebackers, especially if McFadden's out. That's a spot that teams are going to attack the Giants if they can. I don't think you want to put Abdul Carter at off-ball linebacker. Maybe some plays. He did line up today. He triggered a false start from Eckler as the back, because you can see Eckler thought he would have to pick up the blitz from Abdul Carter. So Carter was lined up next to Bobby Okereke and actually came on the blitz to the line and kind of gave one of those shrugs, and Eckler moved, and it was a false start. So, again, back to Carter. Carter was making plays that did not show up in the box score, but they felt his presence. I guarantee you that the Commanders will watch that film back and know that Carter had an impact today. Obviously, as he said, he didn't have an impact enough to win the game. So why talk about the good things he did, because it's all for naught. Um, Another big question, I think, offensively is, does this team have enough firepower to offset the attention that's going to go to Malik Neighbors? And, a lot of us, or I'll just speak for myself, I thought Theo Johnson, Tyrone Tracy, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson would be able to do enough on a given week to take the attention away from Neighbors. That just did not happen today. So when Theo Johnson gets some targets early on, you can't drop him. Because the Commanders are looking at it going, you know what, we'll give Theo Johnson that attempt in man coverage or in zone, and we'll take our chances. We'd rather take our chances with Theo Johnson on an 8-yard route that could turn into a 12-yard route versus Malik Neighbors with an 8-yard route that could turn into a 50-yard touchdown. So they're going to shade the safety over the top. Dallas is going to do the same thing to Malik Neighbors. I mean, he worked very hard today. Malik Neighbors did. He had 12 targets, 5 catches for 71 yards. He had the 25-yarder that was just kind of floated up there to him. I mean, he had to do a couple jump balls. There was nothing really in space to Neighbors. So really felt a lot like last year. And they weren't able to get anything going to Darius Slayton. Wan'Dale Robinson had a good first half. Didn't have Wan'Dale in the second half. Didn't have a great second half. Not much production there. And the running game. The running game was non-existent. 15 carries, 30 yards from the 3 backs. Tracy, Cam Scatteraboo, and Devin Singletary. Russell Wilson actually had 44 yards rushing, which is a little surprising, but that was because he took some of those runs when there wasn't anything down the field. Scatteraboo had a nice exchange early in the first half. When his first snaps, he ended up getting a huge blitz pickup to allow Russell Wilson to make the completion downfield to Malik Neighbors. Then Scatteraboo caught a pass, bounced off 2 tacklers, forced the 3rd defender to take him down. And then he just they didn't get back to Scatteraboo much. Late in the game, they got back to Scatteraboo a little bit. I just think the run game, that's what's most concerning to me right now, is that this offense is showing the same signs that it showed in years past. And fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And it's my mistake to expect the summer to carry over till now. The Giants this is a big week. This is a big week for the Giants. Big week for this coaching staff. Big week for a lot of these guys. Because for all that's being said, last year in week 1, the Washington Commanders lost by 17 points. 17 points they lost in week 1. And they came back in week 2 and played the New York Giants, and we know what happened. It was 21-18. They ended up beating the Giants, and then all of a sudden, things just kind of clicked differently for them. And then the Commanders, they go on and they do what they did last year. But from that perspective, if you consider, again, last year, the Commanders, when the Giants lose 28-6 to the Vikings, the Commanders lost 37-20 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year in week 1. And I can guarantee you everybody in the Commanders locker room was fielding questions of, here we go again. Here we go again. That's what's at stake for the Giants going into this week. And that's kind of where they're at. I mean, I think I know it got a lot of play, the video exchange between Brian Dable and Malik Neighbors. Neighbors basically said he didn't think the energy was there. Dable encourages him to speak up. You're not going to complain about Neighbors now that he's speaking up and wants to do well. That's something that Brian Dable just has to handle and be able to handle it with one of his most talented players. They can handle whatever they have to handle behind the scenes. There was also the incident with Brian Burns. He was seen kind of pushing Abdul Carter off the field. Burns said afterward they were being playful more than anything else. He said he appreciated the fact that Carter wanted to stay on the field. Burns was trying to get on the field. It was his time to sub in, and Carter wanted to stay on the field. It was kind of shooing him away, telling Burns to go off, and then Burns just kind of shoved him back to the sideline. Burns claimed after the game that it was just being more playful than anything else, just two guys being more competitive. So got some questions from some of the guys at K-12, so I wanted to answer them. Jason wanted to know, Andrew Thomas, when he comes back, can this offensive line be serviceable? It's a wait and see right now. They need to be better. Jermaine Illuminor said afterwards, that they are not going to let what happened last year happen again from 1 week to the next. It's put up or shut up. And Illuminor knows it. I would imagine every guy on this roster knows it. They just got to go out and do it. And so if Andrew Thomas comes back, sure. Andrew Thomas, if he's at left tackle, which is the expectation that if he gets a full week of practice this week, Andrew Thomas will be at left tackle against the Cowboys. But remains to be seen if that happens. And again, this isn't all on James Hudson either. He had a tough penalty that really cost the Giants. But there's no telling the Giants get into the end zone, even if they do get in the red zone in that situation. Let's see. Next week, will we see more Bellinger and less Theo from Eric? You know what? Look, I'll chalk up today to Theo having some nerves. I know he wasn't the most experienced pass catcher in college, but this was his first game back. The drops are not acceptable. You don't want him to have those drops, especially when you need guys to make plays and put defenses, keep them honest. But I don't think they're interchangeable. I think Theo plays a different position than Bellinger. But we'll wait and see, and we'll see how that plays out. Producer Paul wanted to know how to have months to put a great game plan together, and that's what they put out there, and no clear game plan for Neighbors. I think the game plan was ineffective because the offensive line was ineffective offensively. They couldn't run the football. I think they wanted to run the football. They wanted then Russell Wilson to take some shots, intermediate, down the field. And when you can't run the football, and one of your better playmakers that you're counting on is Tyrone Tracy and Cam Scatterbo, and you just can't get the run game going, it's now all of a sudden Washington is teeing off, and they're coming after Russell Wilson, and he did not perform under pressure. At one point, he was under pressure for 50% of his snaps. So, look, I think there's accountability across the board, and the Giants didn't adjust well enough. But I just think it was just this offense running through a same old kind of situation. To me, that is the worst situation you can be in. So that's that. And then let's see, any more questions? I think that was pretty much it. I think we covered everything. Again, we'll be in Dallas. So you're going to get a podcast this week. You're going to get a post-game pod. We'll see what the Giants can do. But not the result or the performance that I anticipated. I know a lot of you did not anticipate it. Now we'll go into week 2, and all the questions, as I said in the open, the Giants asked for it, and now they're going to get those questions. They're going to get the Jackson Dart questions. They're going to get a what are you guys going to do in Dallas? And it'll be interesting to see how they handle it because I didn't think Eli Manning was getting benched going into week 3 back when Pat Shurmur announced that Daniel Jones was taking over. And I certainly did not anticipate Eli Manning essentially benching himself and getting benched by Ben McAdoo back when Geno Smith took over. So do I expect Russell Wilson to be the starter for next week? I have no reason to think otherwise, but you just don't know when these things come about when they start flicking on the tape. So we'll see where that's at. But again, we appreciate you being all in, and we are all in. And we will be back this week for a preview of the Cowboys, and then we'll pick it up from there and see if the Giants can avoid another 0-2 start. So for Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. We're out of here at Northwest Stadium down here in Landover, Maryland. Final score, Washington Commanders 21 and the New York Giants 6.